What happened when the truth made everyone turn against you? I never thought my life would unravel because of the truth. But the night I told it, the night I couldn't keep the secret buried, everything shifted. And suddenly, the people I loved most weren't standing beside me. They were standing against me. It started small, almost invisible at first. A strange silence when I entered a room. Averted eyes. Half-finished sentences. And then the weight of something I'd carried for months finally broke me. I told them. We were sitting around the dining table. The kind of Sunday dinner that used to mean safety. My mother's roast. My father's glass of whiskey. My brother tapping at his phone under the table until Dad barked at him to put it away. Normal. Comfortably normal. Except I wasn't eating. My fork just kept scraping the plate while my chest ached with words I couldn't swallow anymore. Dad noticed first. He always did. His eyes sharp, probing. The same ones that once terrified me as a kid snapped to me. "What's wrong with you?" His tone wasn't gentle. It never was. "I need to tell you something," I said. My voice cracked. The room stilled. Even the air conditioner seemed to hesitate. I hadn't planned it. God knows I'd rehearsed in my head 1,000 times, but I thought I'd take it to my grave. The truth was heavy enough to crush me. Saying it out loud meant letting it crush them too. But my father's hand tightened around his glass. My mother's lips pressed into a thin, nervous line. And my brother smirked like I was about to confess something trivial. That pushed me over the edge. So I said it. I said the words that split my life clean in two. For a second, nothing happened. The silence that followed was louder than a scream. And then the storm came. My brother laughed first. Laughed. Like I'd just told a joke too dark for polite company. "You're lying," he said, shaking his head, wiping at his eyes. "Jesus, you're actually lying." My mother flinched like I'd slapped her. Don't you dare bring this filth into our home," she whispered, though her voice shook with something more complicated than anger. And Dad just stared. His jaw worked, grinding down on some rage that hadn't found words yet. His silence was worse than anything. "You all knew," I said. My throat was raw, the words scraping as they left me. "You've known for years. You just pretended not to. And I can't do it anymore." My mother stood abruptly, the chair screeching against the tile. Her hands trembled as she gathered dishes that weren't empty yet. Busy hands, avoiding eyes. "You don't understand what you're doing," she hissed. "You'll ruin this family." "I'm telling the truth," I said, louder now. "How can the truth ruin us?" "Because it's your truth, not ours," Dad finally spoke. His voice was low, dangerous, the kind that used to send me running to my room when I was a kid. "And you'd better think long and hard about the damage you're trying to cause." His words felt like a blade pressed against my skin. I wanted God. I wanted to believe that deep down. They'd believe me. That maybe they'd even thank me for being brave enough to say it. But as I looked at their faces, at the fury, the disbelief, the disgust, I knew. They were choosing denial. They were choosing him. The air tasted like smoke, even though the roast still sat untouched on the table. My brother leaned back, folding his arms across his chest with a smirk that cut deeper than any knife. "Nobody's gonna believe you. You get that, right? Nobody." I laughed, bitter and broken. "That's what you're counting on." Dad slammed his glass down so hard the whiskey sloshed over the rim. "Enough." The word boomed like thunder. Not another word, but I had already opened the floodgate. I couldn't stop now. "Do you know what it's like?" I said, standing so fast my chair toppled. "To carry something this big inside you. To wake up every morning choking on it while the people who are supposed to love you pretend everything is perfect." Mum's face hardened. "You're sick." And just like that, the world shifted. It wasn't about what I said anymore. It was about me. About my sanity. About whether I could be trusted. I felt it in that moment, the tide turning. The people I thought would fight for me were circling the wagons against me. And still, part of me thought maybe, just maybe, it would blow over. Maybe time would soften them. Maybe love would win out. But that night, when I went upstairs, I heard them talking in the kitchen. Their voices low, urgent. My name whispered like a curse. Plans being made, words like hospital and help, and liability floating through the air vents. They weren't planning to help me. They were planning to get rid of me. And in that moment, I realized something that chilled me to my bones. The truth hadn't set me free. It had painted a target on my back, and my own family was ready to pull the trigger. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old house sounded like footsteps coming for me. Every gust of wind rattling the window felt like someone trying to get in. But it wasn't strangers I feared anymore. It was them. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, remembering the words I'd overheard. Hospital. Liability. The way my mother's voice cracked when she said it. The way my father's voice stayed steady, commanding, like he was already issuing orders. By morning, I'd convinced myself I'd imagined it. That maybe my mind, already raw from the confession, had twisted their whispers into something worse. But then the door to my room opened without a knock. Dad stood there, dressed for work, but not carrying his badge. He just looked at me. His hand gripped the frame so tightly his knuckles whitened. "Get up," he said. No good morning, no pretense of kindness. Just an order. My stomach sank. "Why?" "Doctor's appointment." His voice was flat. "Your mother already called the school." My pulse spiked. This was it. The hospital. The plan. They weren't even hiding it. "I'm not going," I whispered. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not surprised disappointment. Like I'd failed a test I didn't know I was taking. "You don't get to decide," he said, stepping into the room. His shadow swallowed me whole. I thought of running, jumping out the window, sprinting barefoot down the street. But I remembered last time I'd tried to leave. The bruises hidden under long sleeves. The way Mom had told the neighbors I was acting out after stress at school. So I went. The drive was silent. My brother sat in the back, earbuds in, smirking whenever he caught my eye in the rearview mirror. Mum kept wringing her hands in her lap. Dad drove like he was on patrol, calm, steady, terrifying. When we pulled up to the clinic, my body went cold. Not a hospital, not yet. A psychologist's office. A beige brick building that looked harmless from the outside. Inside, the receptionist smiled too brightly, asked me to fill out forms I couldn't focus on. My hands shook so badly the pen left jagged scratches instead of words. "Take your time," she said gently. But I saw the look she gave my father when she thought I wasn't watching. Deferential. Respectful. Like she knew who he was. The doctor was a man in his 50s with kind eyes that didn't reach his smile. He asked me questions about sleep, about mood, about whether I ever felt like hurting myself. I tried to tell him the truth. About the nights of terror. The secrets. The weight I'd carried. But every time I spoke, Dad leaned forward in his chair, correcting me. "She exaggerates," he'd say smoothly. "She's always been dramatic. She struggles with reality." The doctor nodded thoughtfully, writing notes. I watched my words disappear, swallowed whole by my father's version of me. At one point I snapped. "You're not listening. He's twisting everything I say." The doctor's eyes softened, pitying. "That must feel very frustrating." Frustrating. That word nearly broke me. Frustrating was when you lost your homework or got stuck in traffic. This was survival. This was me screaming into a void while the walls closed in. By the end of the session, the verdict was clear. Anxiety. Possible delusional episodes. Family therapy recommended. They were building a case. Brick by brick, lie by lie. On the way home, Dad whistled along to the radio like nothing had happened. Mum kept glancing at me in the visor mirror, her face pale and tight. When we pulled into the driveway, my brother leaned close. "Told you no one would believe you," he whispered before hopping out of the car. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in years. I shoved a chair under the handle, even though I knew it wouldn't stop him if he really wanted in. I stayed up writing everything down, every word, every detail, every lie on scraps of notebook paper I hid under the floorboard. If they erased my voice, at least the truth would exist somewhere, but the house itself seemed to conspire against me. Conversations hushed when I entered the kitchen. Mum's phone buzzing with calls she wouldn't explain. Dad taking his gun off only after locking it in the safe, the key always in his pocket. Even at school, it followed me. Teachers who used to smile now looked at me with quiet suspicion. A rumor spreading that I'd had some kind of breakdown. Friends avoiding me in the hall. And through it all, my brother watched. Always watching. Sometimes with amusement. Sometimes with something darker. Like he was waiting for me to break completely. By the third night, I started hearing things. Not voices, at least. I don't think so. But whispers through the vents. My name carried on the hum of the furnace. Plans in the kitchen that stopped when I moved. One night, I pressed my ear to the vent above my bed and heard my mother say, "What if she tells someone else?" And Dad's reply, low and final, "Then she won't have the chance." The air turned to ice in my lungs. I knew then that the hospital wasn't the worst thing they had planned for me. Something darker was coming, and I was running out of time to stop it. I started hiding things. Matches in a sock drawer. Crackers under my bed. A second toothbrush wrapped in tissue and shoved into the pocket of my winter coat. It felt paranoid, ridiculous even, but every bone in my body told me it was survival. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake listening to their footsteps, the squeak of floorboards outside my door. Sometimes Dad would pause there, just standing, the silence heavier than if he'd tried to break the door down. Other times I'd hear Mom's muffled crying, quickly cut off when she realized I was listening. One evening, I came home from school and found my notebook pages gone. The floorboard where I'd hidden and sat slightly raised, like someone had been careless putting it back. My stomach dropped. At dinner, no one said anything, but I caught Dad looking at me too long. And when I pushed my food around instead of eating, he finally spoke. "You've been writing things down." His tone was casual, but his eyes weren't. My fork froze. "So?" He leaned back, crossing his arms. "So, you're creating stories, making records of things that never happened. And when people read them, they'll think you're sick, that you need help." Mom flinched. My brother smirked. I wanted to scream, to demand they give me back my words. But something inside me stopped. Because if they knew I was keeping records, it meant they were scared of them. Scared of me. That night, I started a new system. I used the school library's computers during lunch, typing everything into a draft email I never sent. I saved it to an account they didn't know existed. If anything happened to me, I wanted the truth to be out there, somewhere. But even that wasn't safe. One afternoon, I logged in and found the drafts deleted. Every single one. My stomach turned to stone. Either someone had gotten into my account or worse, someone at school was feeding my father information. Paranoia wasn't paranoia anymore. It was proof. Things escalated after that. Mum stopped letting me out of her sight. She claimed it was worry, maternal instinct, but I knew better. I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was a problem to be managed. And my brother, he started baiting me, whispering cruel things when no one was around. "You're crazy. They're gonna lock you up. You'll thank us later." Once I snapped. I shoved him against the wall, hard enough to make his phone clatter to the ground. He grinned through it, like he'd won something. Later, I found out he'd filmed the whole thing with his laptop camera, careful to make it look like I'd attacked him unprovoked. Another brick in the wall they were building against me. It was around then that I stopped feeling safe even at school. Teachers pulled me aside, asking vague questions about stress at home. The counselor smiled too much, her voice sugar-sweet as she suggested breathing exercises instead of listening to me. And then came the day that broke me. I walked into class, sat down at my desk, and everyone went quiet. Too quiet. Whispering, snickering. I didn't know why until my best friend Emma shoved her phone at me under the desk. On the screen was a video. Me screaming, sobbing, thrashing while my father held my arms down. My mother's voice in the background saying, "See what I mean? She can't control herself." The caption read, "This is what living with her is like." Posted from my brother's account. The blood drained from my face. My classmates stared at me like I was a wild animal that might lash out. Even Emma couldn't meet my eyes. I left school that day and didn't go home. I walked for hours. No plan, no destination, until the sun started to set and the cold cut through my thin jacket. I ended up at the park, curled on a bench, hugging my knees while my breath fogged the air. And that's where she found me. Mrs. Lee, my old teacher, the one person who had looked at me once and seen something other than a problem. She sat beside me without asking, draped her coat over my shoulders, and said softly, "Tell me." The dam broke. Every word I'd swallowed, every fear, every betrayal, it all came pouring out until my throat burned and my chest ached. She didn't interrupt. She didn't correct. She just listened. And when I finally choked out, "They're going to get rid of me," she placed a small object in my hand. A recorder. Tiny, simple, easy to hide. "Let them talk," she whispered. "And this time, don't stop it. Don't erase it. Make them hang themselves with their own words." My heart pounded as I clutched the device. For the first time in months, I felt something dangerous spark inside me. Hope. I hid the recorder inside my sock the first night. The tiny bulge pressed against my ankle felt like carrying a loaded weapon. Every time I walked across the creaky hallway, I was sure they'd hear it ticking like a bomb. But no one noticed. Not at first. Dinner was the usual charade. Dad asking about school, his tone dripping with false concern. Mum fussing with plates she barely touched. My brother scrolling his phone until Dad snapped at him. I kept my eyes down, chewing carefully, pretending I didn't hear the poison lacing their words. "Your grades are slipping," Dad said suddenly. His fork clinked against his plate. "Your teachers are concerned." I swallowed hard. "Because of everything. Because of your behavior," he corrected smoothly. "We're worried about you." The recorder hummed silently against my skin. Every word he spoke etched itself into memory, into evidence. Mum sighed theatrically. "She's been so volatile. Crying, lashing out. I don't even recognize her anymore. It was perfect. Too perfect. They thought they were burying me deeper, but all they were doing was feeding the tape. I kept it hidden for days, weeks, recording every whisper, every accusation, every cruel twist of truth. Dad rehearsing speeches about my delusions, Mom muttering about hospitals, my brother joking that I belonged in a padded cell. And then, one night, I caught something that made my blood run cold. I was in my room, pretending to sleep. Through the vent, I heard Dad's voice, low and controlled. "She won't last much longer. We'll make sure of that." My whole body locked. "What do you mean?" Mom whispered back. A pause. Then, "Sometimes kids like her. Accidents happen. People will understand." The recorder caught it. Clear as day. I didn't sleep at all after that. I lay rigid in bed, clutching the device like it was a lifeline. Because maybe it was. But having proof didn't mean I was safe. If they suspected I had it, I was finished. The tension in the house grew unbearable. Dad's random room checks increased. He'd open drawers, flip through notebooks, his eyes sharp as knives. Once, he even lifted my mattress, staring at me as if daring me to protest. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. Meanwhile, at school, the walls closed in tighter. My brother spread new rumors, claims that I'd threatened to hurt myself, that I'd attacked Mom during an argument. Teachers looked at me with pitying eyes, like they were already planning interventions. Emma stopped talking to me altogether. Her mum, I later learned, had asked Dad for help with a restraining order against her ex, a favor in exchange for silence. And now Emma crossed the hallway without even glancing my way. Every safety net I had was cut. Except Mrs. Lee. We met in secret. Sometimes in her car after school, sometimes in the library stacks when no one looked. I'd slip her the recorder. She'd copy the files to a USB, then return it the next day. "You have enough," she whispered one afternoon, her hand trembling as she passed the device back. "This isn't just abuse anymore. This is dangerous. I can't leave," I whispered back. "They'll come after you too." She shook her head, eyes burning with determination. "They already are. The school's been asking questions about me. Anonymous complaints. But I don't care. You're not alone in this." Her words steadied me. For a while, but then the cracks widened. One night, Dad stormed into my room without warning. His eyes scanned everything: closet, desk, even under the bed. His hand hovered over my backpack and my heart stopped. If he found the recorder, it was over. But then Mum called from downstairs, something about a phone call. He hesitated, then left. The moment his footsteps faded, I crumpled to the floor, clutching the recorder so tightly my knuckles turned white. I couldn't keep it much longer. It was too risky, too close to being discovered. So the next day, I gave it to Mrs. Lee permanently. "Hide it somewhere safe," I begged. "If they find out I have it, I'm dead." She nodded, slipping it into her bag without hesitation. "I'll keep it locked in my desk. No one will touch it." For the first time, I felt like maybe I wasn't walking toward the edge of a cliff. Maybe there was a way out. But Dad wasn't stupid. He sensed the shift. The next week, he started showing up at school, volunteering for career day, shaking hands with teachers, telling stories about raising a troubled daughter with a smile that made everyone laugh. He was infecting my last refuge, turning even my classrooms into extensions of his stage. And then, one afternoon, as I walked out of school, I saw him waiting by the curb, smiling, waving, the perfect picture of a loving father picking up his child. My classmates looked on, whispering about how lucky I was to have such a devoted dad. But when I slid into the passenger seat, his hand clamped down on my thigh, squeezing just hard enough to leave a bruise. His smile never wavered. "Where's the recorder?" he asked quietly, still waving at my teachers. My blood ran cold. He knew. My throat went dry. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered, staring straight ahead, terrified the teachers still watching us might somehow see through the car window. Dad's fingers dug deeper into my thigh, sharp enough to make me wince. "Don't play dumb with me. You're not clever enough to hide something like that on your own. Who's helping you?" I forced myself not to move, not to give Mrs. Lee away. "There's nothing." He let go suddenly, his smile still plastered on his face as he pulled away from the curb. To anyone else, it looked like a father happily driving his daughter home. But I could feel the storm building in the silence between us. The moment we got home, he locked the door behind us. My brother lounged on the couch, grinning like he already knew what was coming. Mum hovered by the kitchen doorway, wringing a dish towel. Dad tossed his keys on the counter, then turned to me. "Last chance, where is it?" My mouth was desert dry. "I don't have anything." The slap came fast, hot across my cheek. My head snapped to the side, my ears ringing. Mum gasped, but she didn't move to stop him. She never did. "You think you can humiliate this family? Make us out to be monsters?" His voice was low, deadly calm. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," I croaked, tasting blood. That was the wrong answer. He shoved me into the wall, his forearm pressing across my chest just enough to restrict my breathing. My brother's laughter filled the room, sharp and cruel. "Stop it," Mom cried weakly, but her hand stayed frozen at her sides. "Tell me where it is," Dad hissed. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was fear, maybe fury, but I met his eyes and whispered, "You're scared." For a heartbeat, I thought he'd kill me right there. His jaw clenched, veins pulsing at his temple. Then slowly he released me. "You're right," he said softly. Too softly. "I am scared. Scared of what you'll do to yourself if we don't step in. Scared of losing my daughter to these delusions." His words dripped with rehearsed sorrow. It wasn't me he was talking to. It was the imaginary jury he was always performing for. Mum finally spoke, her voice brittle. "Maybe it's time we considered admitting her." My stomach dropped. There it was, the plan out loud. Dad nodded gravely. For her own good, I wanted to scream, to claw my way out of that house and never look back. But I knew running now would only prove their point. Instead, I stumbled upstairs, locked my door, and pressed my forehead to the cool wood. My cheek throbbed. My chest ached. But worse than the pain was the knowledge that Mrs. Lee was in danger. If Dad suspected her, if he connected the dots, I had to warn her. The next day, I slipped out of school before the final bell, ducking through the side doors to avoid my brother's watchful eyes. I ran across the lot and into Mrs. Lee's car before she even had the chance to lock it. "He knows," I panted, clutching the seat. "He knows about the recorder." Her face went pale. "Did you say anything?" "No, but he's looking." He's not going to stop until he finds it. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Then we move faster. I'll take what we have to the police. No, I blurted. The thought of walking into a station where Dad was respected, where his word carried more weight than mine. It was suicide. They'll believe him over me. Her eyes softened. Not if we show them the recordings. Your father can't charm his way past his own voice. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But I'd lived too long under his shadow. He'll twist it. He always does. Mrs. Lee reached over, squeezing my hand. Then we twist back. We play smarter. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something dangerous. Not just hope. Power. That night, I pretended to sleep while Dad paced the hallway outside my door. His footsteps paused, then moved on. My heart hammered, but my resolve hardened. If he wanted a war, I'd give him one. The next week, I staged my first move. At breakfast, I let my voice tremble just enough as I asked Mom if she thought I was crazy. She rushed to comfort me, her guilt spilling into soft reassurances. And the recorder hidden this time in my pocket caught it all. The next day, I slipped the file to Mrs. Lee. Make copies, I whispered. She nodded. Piece by piece, we were building something too strong for him to bury. But then 2 days later, Mrs. Lee didn't show up to school. Her classroom sat dark, the blinds pulled tight. The office said she'd taken a leave of absence. Except I knew better. Dad had gotten to her, and if he could silence her, I was next. The day Mrs. Lee disappeared from school, the world tilted on its axis. The hallways buzzed with gossip. Some said she'd had a breakdown, others that she'd moved suddenly out of state. But I knew the truth. She hadn't left on her own. Dad had reached her. That night at dinner, he was smug. His smile stretched too wide, his voice too smooth. He asked me about homework, about upcoming exams, as if nothing had changed. But when I wouldn't answer, he leaned close and whispered just loud enough for me to hear. See? No one's coming to save you. The words curdled in my stomach. For days, I lived like a hunted animal, jumping at shadows, double-locking my bedroom door, listening to the click of Dad's shoes outside my room late at night. My brother made a game of it, sliding notes under my door that said things like TikTok or better behave. The walls were closing in. But then, one morning, I found something in my locker at school. A small flash drive, taped beneath the top shelf. No name, just that. My hands shook as I plugged it into the library computer. Inside were copies of the recordings. Every whispered threat, every admission, every cruel word. Mrs. Lee had done it. She'd hidden the files before she disappeared. Tears blurred my vision. She'd risked everything to protect me. I slipped the drive into my pocket, heart pounding. This was it. Proof. But proof meant nothing if I couldn't get it into the right hands. That night, while the house slept, I crept downstairs with the flash drive clutched in my fist. The plan was simple. Sneak out, find the police, show them the evidence before Dad could twist it. But the front door wouldn't budge. A new deadbolt had been installed, one I hadn't seen before. My blood ran cold. He was locking me in. I turned, and there he was, standing in the shadows of the living room, his eyes gleaming. Going somewhere? His voice was calm, too calm. I froze. The drive dug into my palm, slick with sweat. He stepped closer. You've been very busy. Sneaking around. Recording things you don't understand. My throat closed. You can't stop the truth. His laugh was low, dangerous. Truth is whatever people believe. And no one believes you. Suddenly he lunged. His hand clamped around my wrist, forcing my fist open. The drive slipped, clattering to the floor. We both dove for it, our bodies colliding hard. Pain shot through my ribs as we wrestled. His strength was overwhelming, but desperation gave me claws. I scratched, kicked, bit, anything to break free. And then out of nowhere, Mom screamed. Stop it, both of you. Her voice cut through the chaos. Dad froze, panting, the drive inches from his grasp. Mum snatched it up, holding it against her chest like it burned. Give it to me, he growled. Her hands shook, but she didn't move. What's on here? Lies, he snapped. Delusions. but something in her eyes shifted. For the first time, she looked at him, really looked. Then why are you so afraid of it? The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Dad straightened, smoothing his shirt, his mask snapping back into place. Fine. If you want to play this game, go ahead. But when the truth comes out, don't say I didn't warn you. He walked away, calm as ever, leaving Mom clutching the flash drive like a lifeline. That night, she slipped into my room. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She pressed the drive back into my hand. Tomorrow, she whispered. We'll go together. I wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally chosen me. But morning came, and she was gone. No note, no explanation. Just gone. Dad said she'd needed space. My brother smirked, muttering that she'd finally realized what a burden I was. I knew better. She'd chosen survival. And survival didn't include me. Alone again, I clutched the flash drive like a talisman. Mrs. Lee was gone. Mom was gone. But I still had the truth. I just didn't know how much longer I could hold on to it. Because that night, I woke to the sound of my window sliding open, and someone's hand reaching in. The sound of the window lock clicking back was so soft, I almost convinced myself I'd dreamed it. Almost. I held my breath, pressing myself flat against the mattress, every nerve screaming. The curtains swayed as the night air slipped in, carrying with it the faint smell of cigarettes and sweat. Then a shadow moved. A hand, then an arm, then the full outline of my brother climbing silently into my room. My heart nearly stopped. He thought I was asleep. I forced my breathing slow, steady, while his footsteps creaked closer. He crouched near my desk, rummaging through drawers, pulling open notebooks, scattering papers across the floor. He was searching for the drive. I clenched it tighter under my pillow, praying he couldn't hear the pounding of my heart. Where'd you hide it, freak? He muttered under his breath, almost gleeful. He yanked open the closet, tossing clothes aside, checking every pocket. Then suddenly he froze, his head tilted. He was listening, and before I could react, he was on me. The pillow ripped from under my head, his hand grabbing my wrist, twisting until I cried out. The flash drive glinted between my fingers, caught in the moonlight. Gotcha, he hissed. I fought back, kicking, clawing, anything to get free. We crashed against the dresser, books spilling everywhere. His laugh was manic, taunting. You really thought you were smarter than us? The door burst open. Dad stood there, framed in the hallway light, his face a mask of fury. What the hell is going on? My brother shoved the drive into his palm like a prize. She had it. She's been hiding it all along. Dad stared at me, his expression unreadable. After everything we've done for you. His voice was low, dangerous. I scrambled to my feet, my chest heaving. You're the ones lying. I have proof. People will hear it. Proof? He barked a laugh, holding the drive up. This? You think this means anything? He slipped it into his pocket. It's over. No, my throat burned. Mrs. Lee made copies. The words slipped out before I could stop them, and instantly I knew I'd made a mistake. Dad's face hardened. Mrs. Lee, he repeated slowly. My brother smirked. You gave her our family business, Dad asked coldly. You dragged an outsider into this. She believed me, I shouted, tears stinging my eyes. Because it's the truth, and you can't bury it forever. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Dad turned to my brother. Pack her things, tonight. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? His eyes bored into mine. If you won't get better here, we'll make sure you get the help you need somewhere else. I shook my head violently. You're not sending me away. You don't get a choice, he said. Mum's absence suddenly made sense. She hadn't left. She'd been removed, erased from the board the way he erased anyone who threatened the family script. And I was next. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my room, back against the door, my body trembling. Every plan I'd made, every ounce of evidence gone. My only ally vanished. But as dawn bled through the curtains, something hardened inside me. If they wanted to erase me, I'd burn their script first. I still had one weapon left. My memory. Every whisper, every threat, every word I'd ever recorded. I knew them by heart. If I couldn't prove it with tapes, I'd tell it myself. Loudly. Publicly. In a way they couldn't bury. That afternoon, I walked into school with my head high, though my insides churned. In English class, when the teacher asked for volunteers to read, I raised my hand, but instead of reading the poem, I opened my mouth and spilled everything. The threats, the abuse, the recordings. The night Dad admitted accidents happen, the room went dead silent. My classmates gawked, wide-eyed, as my words tumbled out. A couple of them snickered nervously, unsure if it was a performance or a breakdown. But the teacher didn't laugh. She stepped closer, her face pale, her hand trembling as she told me to come with her. By the end of the day, the principal's office was filled with murmurs. Teachers whispering, counselors pacing. Someone called child services. And when Dad arrived, furious and polished, ready to charm them all, I looked him dead in the eyes and repeated every word again. This time, in front of witnesses. For the first time, I saw his mask slip. Just for a moment. But it was enough. Still, as they escorted me out of the office, I couldn't shake the dread coiling in my gut, because exposing him meant war, and wars always had casualties. The drive to the station was a blur. 2 social workers sat on either side of me in the back seat, their voices gentle, rehearsed, like they'd been trained to handle children on the verge of collapse. "You're safe now," one of them whispered. "Just breathe." But all I could think about was Dad's face when I'd repeated his words in front of the principal. The split second where fury cracked through his mask. It hadn't been defeat in his eyes. It had been a promise that this wasn't over. At the station, they gave me a paper cup of water and asked me to repeat my story again. Every detail, every word I'd ever caught on the recorder. I spoke until my throat burned, until I had no voice left. The detective nodded gravely, jotting notes. "We'll look into this," he said. "Look into this." Words that sounded more like stalling than salvation. When they finally released me to a temporary foster placement that night, I sat in a stranger's living room surrounded by floral wallpaper and the faint smell of lavender. The womankind, middle-aged, brought me a blanket and told me I could sleep without fear. But fear was the only thing I had left, because even in that house I felt his eyes on me. And sure enough, 2 days later, he found me. I was walking home from school with the foster family's daughter when a familiar car slowed beside the curb. My blood turned to ice. The window rolled down, and Dad leaned out, smiling too wide. "Get in," he said softly. I froze. The girl tugged at my sleeve. "Is that your dad?" she asked, confused. His smile widened. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go home." Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then the girl's mother appeared at the door, waving us inside. Dad's smile faltered. He rolled the window up and drove off slowly, but not before locking eyes with me. And in those eyes was the same promise. "You're mine. Always." That night, the foster mother made calls, her voice tight. Extra locks were added to the doors. The social worker assured me they'd increase monitoring. But deep down I knew. Locks meant nothing to a man like him. Days blurred together. I jumped at every sound, every creak of floorboards, every car door outside. Then, one afternoon, the foster mother returned from the mailbox holding an envelope. No stamp. No return address. Just my name scrawled across the front in handwriting I knew too well. Inside was a single photograph. Me sleeping in the foster house bed. My stomach lurched. He'd been inside. That night, I couldn't stop shaking. The foster parents tried to comfort me, but their reassurances crumbled under the weight of the photo. He wasn't just threatening anymore. He was reminding me he could reach me anywhere. The next morning, the detective came to question me again. I showed him the photo, my hands trembling. His face darkened, but his words were careful. "We'll do everything we can." But everything we can didn't sound like enough. By the end of the week, whispers started circulating at school that I was making things up, that I'd staged the photo myself for attention. My brother had been busy, And it worked. Teachers looked at me differently. Friends avoided me. Even the foster daughter gave me wary glances, as though she wasn't sure whether to believe me anymore. Dad didn't need fists or threats. He just needed doubt. And he'd planted it everywhere. But then something happened that changed everything. I was called into the counselor's office at school. Waiting there was Mrs. Lee. Her face was thinner. Her eyes rimmed red, but she was alive. And when she saw me, she hugged me so tightly. I thought my ribs would snap. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "They came after me. Threats. Phone calls. I had to disappear for a while. But I never stopped fighting for you." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printed transcripts, every recording, every word Dad had spoken, copied and safe. "I gave them to Alawia," she said. "Someone outside this town. Someone your father can't touch." Relief flooded me so fast I almost collapsed. For the first time, the truth wasn't just inside me. It was out in the world, in hands stronger than mine. But Mrs. Lee's voice dropped lower, urgent. "You need to be careful. He knows he's losing control. That's when men like him are the most dangerous." Her warning echoed in my head that night as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. And just before dawn, the sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. The crash of glass was so sharp it sliced straight through my chest. I bolted upright in bed, heart hammering. The foster parents shouted from down the hall, their footsteps pounding across the creaky floorboards. Somewhere below, a window groaned on its hinges. He was inside. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing the nearest thing I could find, a lamp, and pressed myself against the wall. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. The foster father shouted, "Who's there?" His voice was brave, but I could hear the fear shaking it apart. Then came another sound. A laugh. Low. Familiar. "Just here for my daughter." My blood froze. The foster mother screamed. The sound of a struggle ripped through the house, furniture toppling, glass shattering. I stumbled into the hallway, shaking, the lamp heavy in my hands. The foster daughter's door cracked open, her wide eyes meeting mine. "What's happening?" she whispered. I pressed a finger to my lips. "Stay quiet. Stay hidden." Downstairs, Dad's voice boomed. "You think you can keep her from me? She's mine." The words struck me like blows. Mine. Always mine. The foster father grunted, then fell silent. The thud of his body hitting the floor made my stomach twist. I wanted to run. God, every instinct screamed at me to run. But Mrs. Lee's warning echoed in my mind. This is when men like him are the most dangerous. If I ran, he'd only come harder. If I hid, he'd tear the house apart until he found me. So I did the only thing left. I walked down the stairs. The living room was chaos, shards of glass glittering like ice across the carpet. A chair overturned. The foster mother pressed against the wall with tears streaking her face. The foster father groaned on the floor, clutching his side. And there, standing in the center like a king surveying his ruined kingdom, was Dad. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "There she is," he said softly, almost tender. "My girl." I tightened my grip on the lamp, forcing steel into my spine. "I'm not yours." The words cracked the air like a whip. For a moment, his face flickered, rage and disbelief colliding in his eyes. Then he smiled. Slow, cold. "You think those people believe you?" He gestured at the broken room. "You think some tapes, some outsider teacher, will erase who you are? Your blood. My blood. You don't get to walk away from that." My hands trembled, but I lifted the lamp higher. "If you touch me, I swear I'll..." He stepped forward, arms out like he was offering an embrace. "You'll what? Hit me? You can't fight me. You're too much like your mother." Weak. That word cut deeper than any blow. Behind him, the foster mother whispered into her phone. The faint crackle of a 911 operator bled through the silence. Dad's head snapped around, and his smile broke. "You called the cops?" His voice rose, jagged with fury. He lunged, ripping the phone from her hand, and hurling it against the wall where it shattered into pieces. "Stop," I screamed. My voice cracked, but it stopped him for a heartbeat. He turned back to me, chest heaving, eyes wild. "This is your fault," he spat. You turned them against me. You ruined everything." And then he charged. I swung the lamp with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with a sickening crack. The bulb exploded, sparks raining across the carpet. Dad staggered, clutching his head, roaring like a wounded animal. The foster daughter screamed from upstairs. The foster father tried to rise, groaning in pain. And then sirens. Wailing, growing louder, closer. Dad froze. His chest rose and fell, his eyes darting toward the front door, toward escape. But before he could move, red and blue lights flooded the shattered windows. The front door burst open. Officers stormed inside, weapons raised. Hands where we can see them. For the first time, I saw something I never thought I'd see in him. Not rage, not control. Fear. They forced him to the ground, cuffing his wrists behind his back as he thrashed and cursed. His eyes found mine, burning with hatred. "This isn't over," he shouted as they dragged him out. "You hear me? It's not over." The words echoed long after the door slammed shut. The house was left in shambles, the air thick with broken glass and the stink of fear. The foster mother clutched her daughter, sobbing. The father groaned, trying to sit up. And me? I stood in the center of it all, shaking, the shattered lamp still clutched in my hand. The sirens faded into the distance, carrying him away. But his voice lingered, coiled tight around my ribs. "It's not over. The trial didn't happen overnight. Nothing ever does." First came the interviews, endless hours under fluorescent lights, while lawyers and detectives asked me to recount the same horrors again and again. Then came the waiting weeks of silence broken by whispers of motions filed. Hearings delayed, evidence reviewed. But the truth had legs now. It didn't just live inside me anymore. It had copies, transcripts, recordings. It was out there in hands stronger than mine, and my father couldn't claw it all back. Still, his shadow lingered. Every time a door slammed too loudly, every time I caught sight of a man with broad shoulders and a crooked smile, my chest locked up. At night, I'd wake sweating, hearing his voice at my ear. This isn't over. But something else had changed too. People started to believe me. Teachers who once avoided my gaze now whispered apologies. Emma, my old best friend, showed up at my foster home one afternoon, tears streaking her face, joking out that she'd been wrong, that she should have stood by me. Even Mom appeared, pale and shaking, her hands twisting in her lap as she finally admitted what I'd known all along. She'd chosen silence, because silence was safer. Safer for you or safer for him? I asked. She couldn't answer. The day of the trial, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. I sat at the witness stand, palms sweating, knees trembling. My father sat just feet away, dressed in a crisp suit, his smile calm and confident. He looked at the jury like they were old friends, like he'd already won. When it was my turn to speak, my voice shook at first. But then I remembered Mrs. Lee, sliding the transcripts across the desk. I remembered the photograph left in my foster bed. I remembered the sound of glass shattering and the look of fear on his face when the sirens came. And I told everything, every word, every bruise, every whisper through the vents at night. The jury leaned forward, listening. Some flinched when the recordings were played aloud. The words that had once been my private hell now filled the room. Undeniable. "You think you can humiliate this family? Make us out to be monsters? She won't last much longer. We'll make sure of that. Accidents happen. People will understand." His voice, his words, unmasked. For the first time, the power shifted. He wasn't the narrator anymore. I was. When the verdict came guilty on multiple counts of abuse and endangerment, my breath left me in a rush I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. My body shook, but not from fear, from release. Still, justice didn't feel like victory, because justice doesn't erase the nights I slept with a chair against my door. It doesn't erase the way my brother smirked while I cried. It doesn't erase the silence of a mother who looked away. Afterward, people congratulated me. They said I was brave, strong, resilient. But bravery doesn't feel like survival. Survival feels like a scar you can't peel off. Mrs. Lee hugged me outside the courthouse, tears streaming down her face. It's over, she whispered. But I knew better. It wasn't over. It would never be over. His voice still lived inside me, coiled like barbed wire around my ribs. The damage wasn't undone just because the world finally saw it. And yet something had shifted, because now, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't just see the girl they tried to silence. I saw the girl who refused to disappear. I saw the girl who told the truth anyway. And that truth had turned the world against me once. But in the end, it also saved me. The night I moved into a new foster home, safer this time, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet. The air smelled faintly of soap, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, no footsteps paced outside my door. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. Mine, not his. And though the scars would never fade, though his voice might whisper in my dreams for years to come, I whispered back into the silence. I'm not yours. That was the day I stopped recognizing who I used to be. Because survival changes everyone.